All right, you are now live.
Right. Thanks, Elizabeth. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We'll call this meeting to order. We have quorum. That's great. Just a reminder that the meeting is live broadcast for people at home to view through YouTube, and the clerk will need to make sure that the live stream, so we're all good in that regard. And just a reminder that video and audio are everything that you say do is being recorded. So gentle reminder. So we'll call the meeting to order, and I'd like to start by offering a land acknowledgement that the Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people, and the municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we're all treaty people. So we'll just do a roll call. So I am here. Hannah, you are here. Councillor Lovelace is not yet here. Jane, you're here. And Liz, you are also here. Great. So we have regrets from Councillor Kent and from Sonia. And we have Tracy is here with us. Amy is here, Bailey is here, and Elizabeth is here as well. Great, thank you. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so let us go on to approval of the minutes from our February 1st meeting. Are there any errors or omissions? Okay, seeing none, then can we have approval of the minutes as circulated? We need a mover.
I will move to approve.
Okay, Liz moved, and Hannah, you were fast off the draw. Second, yes?
Yep.
Awesome, thank you. So the minutes of February 1st, 2024 are approved as circulated.
So yeah,
Jackie,
we'll
we
just get
need
you
to
to
vote.
call for the question.
We need to vote.
Oh, and there's Councillor Lovelace. Welcome.
Yeah, and Councillor Lovelace just joined as well.
Hi, great to see everyone. Sorry about that. I was just having some trouble getting in.
No worries. Good to see
So
you.
I'll call for the question.
Okay. So that the minutes of February the 1st are approved as circulated. All in favor?
I
Ayes. Anyone opposed? No. Okay, great. Thank you for that. So the minutes from February the 1st are approved as circulated. Thank you for that. Moving on then to item number 3, approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Does anyone have any items that they would like to add?
So, Madam Chair, I'd like to speak to that. Two things that we'd like to do with regard to the agenda, and that is to swap item number 6.1 with item number 9.1.1 so that we could have the presentation on the public appointments policy early on in the meeting. So that's the first thing. So that would just be, although Elizabeth, maybe you help me, maybe we just 6.1 just becomes 6.2, does it?
No, the easiest thing to do in this case would just be to, request that 9.1.1 be considered prior to 6.1.
Oh, okay. So we're just going to request that 9.1.1 happen before 6.1, which means then immediately following that, we'd have the review of the Indigenous Women in Two-Spirit Campaign School. That's one thing I would like. And the second is I would like it add an item into the item 10, which is the application of the GBA Plus to the planning and development policy. And this is regarding the general correspondence that was circulated to us. So I'm going to make a motion that we approve the agenda as amended with the insertion of item 9.1.1 just prior to the item 6.1 and the addition of that item into item 10. I'm hoping I'll get a seconder for that motion.
Hannah, seconded, yeah. Okay, so can we approve that now, Elizabeth? Are we good?
Yep. So I just wanted to note as well for the record that there are no additions or deletions from the clerk's office. But yeah, you are all good to call for the question.
Okay, so that do you want me to read it out, Jane, or do you want to read it out?
Well,
You
I
can just
thought
say that the agenda be approved as amended.
Okay,
Yeah,
so the
so my
agenda
mo-
is, sorry, go ahead, Jane.
just that it's approved as, that I'm making the motion that the agenda be approved as amended.
Okay, great, thank you.
Jen,
Sorry, missed that. Question?
question for the vote. Yes.
Yes. So all in favor?
I,
Okay, thank you. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. So that's carried. So that is the approval of the changes to the agenda as discussed. Thank you for that. If we can move on then to item number 4, business arising out of minutes. There's none. Is that correct? Thank you, Elizabeth. Item number 5, call for a declaration of conflicts of interest and ask if there are any committee members that have a conflict to declare. Please declare it now. Hearing none. There are no conflicts of interest to declare. Thank you for that. Okay, so now we're moving on to 9.1.1. So we'd like to invite Ian McLean, Municipal Clerk, and Annie Sherry, Public Appointments Coordinator, to give their presentation. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start off just first off by saying thanks for having us. It's always a pleasure to come to this group. And as much as I wish it was in person, there's enough people under the weather right now that I'm kind of glad it is virtual for the first time in my life. I also wanted to say and just acknowledge that we're here the day before International Women's Day, and that I wanted to appreciate you letting us come and take some time on your agenda today. And we are here to provide a fairly brief, but hopefully a concise overview of Halifax Regional Council's new public appointment policy that was adopted in August of 2023. Just to quickly talk about some of the changes that have happened on the appointment process and some of the efficiencies we're seeing to try to provide service to these groups. So I'm going to share my screen and do a brief presentation. This is a similar presentation that was provided to Executive Standing Committee and Regional Council. I also want to acknowledge that I am joined today with Annie Sherry, who is the Public Appointments Coordinator. She's in a term position, taking over for our normal person who's been requisitioned to come and help us support the election for 2024. So I just wanted to give a big shout out and thank you to Annie for stepping up in this role and for coming to this meeting. So if I can remember how to share my screen.
Just be the arrow at the bottom there.
Should be okay. It's more the amount of screens I have that I'm navigating. Is that coming through okay?
Yep, that looks great.
Perfect. So as I said before, this is going over briefly the new public appointment policy that was adopted in August of 2023 by Halifax Regional Council. The purpose of this policy is to establish a process for the appointment of members to the committees of council, as well as external bodies that are supported by the Halifax Regional Municipality Municipal Clerk's Office. The intention behind this review is to create a public appointment policy that is principle-based, consistent in implementation, and is administered with integrity across all of the different boards. This has been quite a lengthy process. It did have a bit of a delay because of COVID. It was happening kind of during the review point in time. But this is a review and an update to a policy that has been around since 2011. The intention behind the review of the policy, and I will be open, the recruitment that we have currently finished, we finished in the fall, was the first recruitment we did under the new policy. So there may be some tweaks that happen in our lessons learned once it happens. It was intended to provide some efficiencies administratively, but also to members of the public who apply for positions within the Halifax Regional Municipality, to try to prioritize communication to all groups and also to try to make sure that the process for the people that are applying the policy, but also the people that are applying it, are respected and done, so we can get the committee appointments turned around as soon as we possibly can, while still allowing for the appropriate time to do the appointments and also orientate new members. The engagement for this policy review was multifaceted, including engagement with the public and including engagement with different groups within the organization, within the HRM. I will say, and I'll be very open, that some of the feedback from this group and some of the feedback on some of the frustrations on previous recruitments were applied to this policy in an attempt to address those issues that have come up in the past. And I want to say a big thank you for that. Without that feedback, I don't think we have as strong of a policy, and we will continue to try to err on and try to do consistent, never stop improving what we're doing. The principles that we're looking at for this is to value the community participation that is fundamental to the municipality, to have appointments made by council that reflect the diversity of the communities and the communities that they serve, and to bring the appropriate skills, expertise, and perspectives to these committees to help support good governance. Now, because of this review, there were many changes that were made, and I'm going to very, very briefly go over some of them and talk a little bit of why we're hoping that creates some efficiencies in the process. So the first thing that was done is the policy was rewritten as an administrative order. So it is so it's coming from council and is driving the process. It should, and we're hoping this creates more transparency, aligns with our operational procedures, and provides some clarity to the process. The recruitment timelines were adjusted in order to reduce some of the information that we requested from applicants. This is done in response to some of the feedback we received on the time it took to apply. And we also, from what we have been able to observe in the evaluation of the applications, we were able to gain much of this information through the other application processes. And the hope is that this made this easier for people to put their names forward. One of the things that did happen is the number of committees that an applicant could apply for was reduced from 2 to 1. This was done because of many instances where we had people considered for the same committees, but they can't be appointed to multiples. So we would have some people who'd be considered for many, and in the middle of a recruitment process, we would find out that the candidates that were being looked at were similar, and we would have to go back and restart some of the process. We're finding this has created some efficiencies and has been much clearer for applicants so far. The nomination process utilizes review boards and interview panels as a way to try to go through, and with the way we've made some adjustments to that is it's trying to speed up the timing that those are formed in order to respond to the applications in the most expedient manner possible. And when the appointments are made, we looked at ways to try to make efficiencies on the communication for appointments and the process for a reappointment for our external boards. The most important thing that I'd like to communicate through this is that this is a council process that needs to follow and hit different meetings and different committee meetings in order to happen. That does mean that there is some time that needs to happen in order for us to get these appointments moved forward. And we do have multiple and many committees that we are supporting in the recruitment process. So I really quickly want to talk about the recruitment types that we do. So we have a standard recruitment, we have a special expertise recruitment, a specified stakeholder recruitment, and then our external body. So the groups that are not managed by the HRM, but are supported by us through the recruitment process. The different committees of the organization fall under these different types of recruitments. So the Women's Advisory Committee would follow under a standard recruitment cycle. Our standard recruitment cycles are done in the spring and the fall each year. We do 2 recruitments throughout the year. And if there is a need to do a special recruitment, council can direct that. The hope is the special recruitments are done as minimally as possible, specifically because of budget and staff timing. But also we do in our hearing that we want to be cautious on the amount of times we go to the public to solicit their applications. The more that we go, we're finding the less applicants are actually coming forward. We want to try to create it into a cycle and try to be consistent on when we're going through our recruitment process. And we find the applications are significantly increased when we are not doing a special recruit, when we're doing the broader ones. The application process for a standard application is an application form only. We have tried to modify the application form to pull out as much of the reference and cover letter information that we had asked for in the past, without having the applicant go through the process of duplicating that information through a resume or through a cover letter. We do not need that for the standard process. We are finding that we have not received in our first, and we have not received much negative feedback on that. That has been received, and it was just responding to some of the feedback we had from people who spoke to the complication and the difficulty in pulling together a specific cover letter or resume. They are not short processes to go through. I'm going to move forward to the appointment selection process. So this is where we are sitting right now with the Women's Advisory recruitment that occurred late in the fall of 2023. We are moving forward to the review board process, which will be occurring within the next week, which has been the normal timeline and process for this, because we are trying to build in as many of these review boards for the committees that we're doing. That then goes into the nominating body, which for the Women's Advisory Committee is the Executive Standing Committee. The nominating body could make adjustments to the recommendation for the people that are the applicants. And then we move to an interview process and then on to a ratification approval process for people who are appointed to the committee. So right now we are, for the Women's Advisory Committee, we are in the review board timelines. And we are expecting this process to move forward throughout the spring and hopefully quite quickly, depending on the meeting schedule. The communication process to applicants is pivotal. We value people putting their names forward for all of our boards and committees, and we attempt with everything in our power to communicate with them clearly and quickly on the process, but also the timelines. They are provided a notice. They're provided a notice that we receive their application, and also throughout the nominating process. And then finally, when they are appointed, or if they are not appointed, we try to communicate with them as well. Publicly, we post and do an active promotional campaign for our board and committee recruitment. And we do post the names of people who are appointed, and we update the website so people are aware of who has been appointed to these committees. Finally, we do build in a time for an orientation of new members, an orientation for new members, not just on the committee itself, but also to the responsibilities and the services available to them when they're representing their boards and committees, specifically how to function within a meeting, how we operate with our rules of procedure, and specifically the Municipal Government Act and FOIPOP lenses that need to be approached. So that was very, very quickly an overview of what has happened with the public appointment process. And I also wanted to take this opportunity to say a very, very large thank you from myself, from the Municipal Clerk's Office, to the outgoing members of the Women's Advisory Committee. I did ask permission prior to this meeting to see if I could do this, and I've been looking forward to it. But Jane has been an integral feature of this committee since its inception in 2020. And I'll be frank, provided me a great deal of information and history and knowledge through the work that she's done in the reports and from this committee when I came onto the HRM. As a part of this, there's going to be new members, and we're going to have members that have been very long-standing and instrumental leaving. And I wanted to provide a thank you to you, Jane, and also to say publicly how much it's the learnings and the appreciation that has come forward because of your leadership with this group. And the information, the quality of this group has very much been driven by what you have done for this. So I wanted to give a chance to say a thank you, and also thank you for giving us a chance to talk about this process. And I am available if there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Ian, for that presentation. And thank you for your kind words to Jane. I think we all share those kind words, and we're all grateful as well to Jane for her leadership on this committee. And it's been a pleasure working with you, Jane, as well. So thank you for that. So we'll go ahead. Sorry, Annie, did you have comments you wanted to make at this point? No, okay, so we'll open it up for questions and we'll go through our speakers list. And I had kind of so thank you again, Ian. That was a really clear presentation, very concise, very clear. I had a question about what sort of feedback loop is there for committee members who leave midterm, or even for those who fulfill their term, to provide feedback on the process of both serving on a committee and how they were selected for the committee. And that sort of feeds into a part 2, if I may, which is about those who are shortlisted but are not offered a position on a committee. Are they also given a bit of a feedback loop to let them know what the status is of their application? Does it stay in a holding pattern and they get redeployed to another committee, etc.? So those are my 2 questions.
Thank you very much. So I think what we are working on right now is the creation of a appointment program within the Office of Municipal Clerk. We've spent a great deal of our resources in the last little while developing this new policy and trying to get through the implementation of it. And that would be, from the formal standpoint, the next piece that we are trying to move forward on. One of the things that I have committed to, and actually I believe Councillor Lovelace is one of the people that was pushing that conversation as well, is some form of an exit interview or exit survey component that we could do. And that is something we are actively looking on. From an informal, unofficial, but very much offered perspective, I will, and our office will offer to do some of those conversations, and I have and will have those conversations with people when they are leaving the committees. And we take and have taken a lot of that information and applied it to the public appointment policy refresh. And I will be very honest that this is the next stage that we are going to try to see some improvements on, so we can get that communication loop completed. The midterm replacements, those are sometimes the opportunity where we will see the special recruitments if we do have any quorum issues or any of the specific expertise positions become vacant. But to your second question, what we have been doing recently is we have been asking for appointments to be made with people identified who could step in. So we could have, I'm trying to think of a good word of phrasing it, but these are people who are not appointed right now, but they may be appointed if people do vacate the committee or do not accept an appointment. And we do communicate that to those individuals. This is new. This is something we are doing to try to create not just efficiency for committees for appointments, but also to try to do exactly what you just said. Talk to the people who've applied to say, we actually have the numbers we need at this moment, but we would like to have you on our list if you would like to be available if we do have a vacancy. This is something that I could commit to coming back to this group after we do a couple cycles of the new public appointment policy to see if we've identified any improvements in that area.
Great, thank you so much, Ian. That was really helpful. So we'll move on to our next person on the speakers list. Hannah, over to you, please.
Thank you for the information. It was very helpful to understand where it's coming from. My question is around the uptake. Are you finding that people are seeing the links and the registration to sign up to committees? Like, are you finding that there is an uptake even though it's only twice a year? I know you said when you push it more, you're having less, but how much less? And is there still an uptake for things?
So the Halifax Regional Municipality supports a significant number of committees. I would say more than I believe many other municipalities. So the question is very much, I would say, dependent sometimes on the recruitment cycle and dependent on the committee. We have committees where we have a significant application pool that comes in. We have other committees, specifically the committees that ask for the specialized. So we have committees that are looking for engineers or accountants, some of them specifically looking at environmental subject matter experts. Those are the recruitments that are much more complicated just because there is such a small pool of it. What we do and what we attempt to do is work with our colleagues at Diversity and Inclusion to ensure that our promotion of the recruitment campaigns is diverse and widespread. And we are reaching into our colleagues who have those connections and those built-in relationships to try to get the word out as much as possible. This is another area that we are always trying to improve on. We do an evaluation of every communication campaign, and we do look at the applicants. Like I'll be very honest, the applications to the Women's Advisory Committee, there was very many. The applications to be a civil engineer on some of the review boards that we have, far fewer. We aren't seeing that as a major barrier right now, but we are monitoring it as well, and we will look if we are seeing any issues.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Mm.
If we're seeing so many applications for the Women's Advisory Committee, why is that not being reflected with the membership presence?
The number of people on the committee is specific in the terms of reference. So we can only have the specific number of people appointed to the committee as on the terms of reference. And specifically on that, there's other subcategories we have to fall under. So as this review board goes forward, we will see more people and new faces within this group.
Okay, cool. Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you, Hannah. Councillor Lovelace, over to you, please.
Thank you so much. So I've been down this path quite a few times with other committees. Appreciate the fact that you raised the point that I want exit interviews. I think that is how we're going to learn how well we're doing with the committees. Obviously, there's work plans and objectives and goals and so on for the committee. But for people who are leaving early, I think it's extremely important for us to understand why. Now, obviously, some people, they move, they get a new job, whatever, they're living their life and they're no longer able to be. But for those individuals, who we didn't do a good enough job keeping them on the committee, that's what I want to understand. How can we do this work better to ensure people, have the tools, the resources that they need in order to commit to this work. I don't have any other comments, Madam Chair, but I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to just to get that plug in there for exit interviews. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lovelace. I don't know if Ian or Annie, if you wanted to say anything further on that point, or if you feel that you've covered it.
Just that absolutely, it is something that we are trying to bake in. The midterm, or the people that do leave before the end of their term, we do try to do a follow-up on and try to make sure that we are addressing any issues. And to be honest, a lot of the time it is largely to do with issues outside of the committee itself, just capacity and timeline things. So it's making sure we're responding and reacting appropriately, and really trying to get that data and absolutely acknowledging that it's something that we are trying to see some improvements on, and hopefully having the staff capacity to be able to do that.
Great, thank you.
And if I may, Chair, thank you. So building off of both Councillor Lovelace's question and the member before, Hannah, I believe, one of the things that we're also keeping in front of mind for this particular recruitment process is to ensure that we are putting, enough alternate kind of members, so that if a member does step out, there are multiple options for folks to step into those into the positions, to make sure that committees aren't having issues with quorum. And so operationally, it's something that we're trying to prioritize across the board.
Great. Thank you for that, Annie. Jane, over to you, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Ian, first I'd like to say thank you for your kind remarks. I really appreciate it. And I just want the rest of you to know how supportive Ian has been for the whole time that I've been the chair. Every time I've had an opportunity to talk to him or ask him things, he's just right there. He's been very supportive and encouraging, and that matters a lot. Having said that, now I'm going to put his feet to the fire because he knows I do that. So help me understand why the application deadline for positions on the Women's Advisory Committee is November, and it's just getting to the review board in March. From my I'm long in the tooth. I've been around the block a few times. I worked in government, academics, and business. And I find that pretty unacceptable as a timeline. So could you talk to me about why it is that long?
Yeah, that's no issue at all. So we've had 8 staff review boards for multiple committees between the close of the nomination period and now. We have this program supported by one individual and a small portion of myself. And we would absolutely love to turn around, but staff capacity wise and the ability to pull the review boards together and the ability to balance the number of committees that we have, sometimes it takes longer than we would like it to be. What we are seeing with this is we're seeing a stark increase and improvement in timing. I'll be frank, we have seen prior to the changes of the public appointment policy where review boards would not be happening until months after people on committees' terms were completed, and we had people serving in their roles for far after their terms were supposed to be. The terms for the Women's Advisory Committee are up in April. We have been trying to prioritize meeting the expectations for all the committees and the external committees, which have potentially, and I will be open, some of them have much more aggressive timelines for when people's application, when their times are due. And as another portion of this, we are in a municipal election year, which does create some significant staff capacity pulls on the Office of Municipal Clerk. And Annie has come in and done an admirable job of stepping into a new role. But that transition period and pulling April to support the election absolutely caused some delays as a portion of it. We are looking at options and opportunities to try to speed this process up. We can probably find some, like even going through this process the first time, I do believe we have found places and areas that we can cut out some of those timelines. And I am in no way whatsoever trying to run away from your comment. We need to try to speed this up, and we are going to try to do whatever we can to try to turn this into a program, like I said, that when we can see this become more of a program and a repeatable program, I absolutely hope to have this happening much sooner than it has been. And in no way do I think that question is offside, and absolutely appreciate the fact that it came, Jane, because I would expect nothing less.
Could I just do a follow-up, Madam Chair? The other thing then I would say, I appreciate what you're saying about, the pressures on staff time. That I understand that. But one of my concerns, of course, is that talent always has multiple options. And so, you want to snatch the talent before it goes somewhere else. And so I'm thinking that because it could be potentially a long time before the applicant hears whether or not they've been successful, that information should be communicated to the applicant. The applicant's application could be acknowledged, and the applicant could be told that given the multiple committees, blah blah blah, that they should not expect to hear a response until, I don't know, end of March or whatever it is that your time frame allows. And my suggestion is that would just perhaps help us prevent us from losing some good talent that just goes, well, I've got better things to do with my time, and move on to something else.
So what I can confirm is we do acknowledge receipt of applications, and we do try to communicate the process as best we can through our municipal channels. But I think that is an absolutely appropriate statement, and that'll be taken under advisement, and we can look at the interim informal and formal communication specifically with that in mind, with the acknowledgement that we are trying to speed everything up as fast as we can too. So it's not one or the other. I think that both of those things are things that we will look at trying to address. And I appreciate that. I think that is very, very helpful information and perspective for us too. I want to say one more thing. From a observational going through, we are not seeing a ton of people say I am no longer in. That is not something that is very prevalent, I would say. That is not me saying that it is not a risk and not something that is not happening, but that has not been we are not seeing a massive amount of that, but that is additional comment, not taking away from what I said before of I do believe that everything that you provided forward is truths that we need to look into as well.
Can I just say, I think though, for our committee, that may have happened because last year we thought we had a person and then all of a sudden we didn't. So we're not a big committee and I think that happened. So
yeah, and I in no way want to say that has not. I think that is a very important risk that we need to consider.
okay, thanks.
But then you
just-
got me, Jane. So, if someone hadn't dropped out, you would be Lizless. So reflect on that.
Well, I was Liz. I mean, I was thinking, well, how dare I say this? Because, maybe Liz wouldn't be, anyways, we're delighted to have you, Liz. But it was a case in point. And it's also a case in point of the value of when it happened, there was somebody ready to jump in. So that was good news. Yeah. And
In fact, my apologies. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask one more thing about quorum, because now I understood, because when I was a chair and we were losing members, I was really concerned about quorum, but I understood that the quorum, like today, for example, the quorum is only it's based on the number of members we currently have, which is not the same as, we have 7 members currently when our full complement's 11. So is that not correct? So why would quorum ever be a problem?
Yeah, there has been some adjustments for some of the advisory committees to allow for, sorry, Elizabeth, did you want to pop in there?
Oh, I was just going to speak to some of the past issues that we had with quorum. Whenever, for all past meetings, quorum has always been based on the number of active members. So if there was ever a case where a resigned member would have been considered, it only, as part of quorum, it only would have been that the member had not yet officially resigned. So all of our practices in terms of quorum would have, if there was 9 members on the committee, quorum would be 5. Quorum is never based on what the full complement would be. So in cases where we've had issues with quorum, it's because we didn't have a sufficient amount, or sometimes there were also cases where quorum was lost during a meeting, but those numbers were always based on the current amount of members and current membership.
Right, thanks for that clarification, Liz. Elizabeth, so over to you, please, Liz, for your questions.
Oh, I have no questions. And I already made a quip, so I have nothing more to add.
Okay, thanks. So I'll go back to the start of the list again. I just have one quick one, if I may, Ian, and this is a follow-up on the exit interviews. I hope that you will consider asking the difference between in-person and virtual. And I do know that for people to get downtown for 4:30, I had a couple of people just, say to me basically, wow, 4:30 is not the best time. And I understand people don't want to start at 6 and go until 9. So there has to be some give and take. So it would be interesting to know if the decision to leave has anything to do with the in-person versus virtual versus time of day, because I think for some people that can be incredibly taxing.
Yeah, and I would add, I think that is information that is important for us to start getting a handle on, an idea on in general, not just in the exit interview phase.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess wheels are turning, and we will look at how to be able to pull some of that information with the current staffing capacity to make sure that we're providing that information to this group. Because I would offer as well for this group, we can try to make whatever the committee would like to see happen work with it within operational confines. So if at any point in time there is a conversation on appropriateness of start time, location, in-person, virtual, that is something that can occur, and we can support that conversation to make sure that the committee is meeting in the manner of which it would like to be. So I think I agree. I think the virtual in-person dynamic is a personal major touch point for myself and for our office, because the virtual meeting experience has very much changed governance. So this is something that we probably need to do, not just with the outgoing members, just in general. So very noted and appreciate the comment.
Thanks, Ian. So any other questions that you have for Ian or Annie before we move back to our agenda? Okay, so seeing no additional questions, again, thank you to both Ian and Annie for being here. That was a very helpful presentation, and we wish you well. Ian, you have something you wanted to add? Go ahead.
I just wanted to say again, thank you. Thank you for the mentorship, Jane. And also, when it comes down to it, you'll be seeing our faces a few more times when we get into the orientation for the new members and some of the other pieces. And looking forward to providing more election administration information to this group as we get closer to October 19th.
Thanks very much, Ian. All right, so thank you, Ian. Thank you, Annie. And we will now move back to where we left off in our agenda. So we are moving back to 6.1, a review of Indigenous Women and Two-Spirit Campaign School and Leadership Summit. So we'll invite Bailey, Tracy, and Jared Watton to provide a presentation. I think it's Karen Bernard will actually be giving the presentation. Apologies for that. So over to you. Thank you.
So has Karen joined the meeting? Yes, wonderful.
Yes,
I
I
just-
just promoted her to panelist. Sorry.
Okay.
You go
I
ahead.
just wanted to do a quick little introduction to say that we had funding provided to us by FCM to be able to do this project. I wanted to thank Bailey and Jared for their leadership on this. We also worked with Cheryl Kopej-Guiu, who was our former Indigenous Services Advisor. I think everybody's done a great job connecting with our partners. Thanks to Karen and her team for all of their support. So I'm going to turn it over to Bailey and Jared to do a quick sort of overview, and then Karen will speak specifically from their engagement with the project. So Jared and Bailey, do you have your presentation?
I believe Bailey's sharing it.
I'm unable to share. Elizabeth, are you able to
Oh.
share the presentation?
Yes, sorry, 1 second. I think that is
Perfect.
because I have not yet promoted you to co-host.
Oh, not a problem.
Should be able to now. Sorry about that.
Not a problem. Perfect. Is everyone able to see that?
Looks great.
Amazing. So yeah, hello, Women's Advisory Committee, and hello, Karen, long time no see. Jared and I are just going to quickly go over some of the things before we get to Karen talking about some of the experiences. As you all know, my name is Bailey Brown. I'm the staff support, and my pronouns are they, them. So back in September, I talked about it with you all briefly. A couple of months ago, we had a Indigenous Women in Two-Spirit Campaign School and Leadership Summit that had taken place, funded by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities CanWIL project, which is the Canadian Women in Local Leadership Project. So this project is a 3-year-long project from 2021 to 2024. Their aim was to increase the participation of women in municipal leadership within underrepresented groups. The project leverages the successes of past Federation of Canadian Municipalities projects, such as Towards Parity in Municipal Politics, which took place from 2018 to 2020, and Diverse Voices for Change, which took place from 2016 to 2018. Halifax Regional Municipality also took part in the project Diverse Voices for Change. So the Canadian Women in Local Leadership Project had 4 core objectives. One was strengthening the capacity of women, particularly women from equity deserving groups, to run an elected office. 2 was creating a more conducive context for women leaders to thrive. 3 was enhancing the capacity of municipal stakeholders to address gender-based violence and harassment. And 4 was mobilizing knowledge and sharing best practices across municipalities. So our HRM Indigenous Women in Leadership program, our goal was to establish a campaign school grounded in the unique needs and experiences of Indigenous women, gender diverse, and Two-Spirit people. Our aim was to reduce the systemic barriers Indigenous women, gender diverse, and Two-Spirit people face in running for and thriving in local government. And our target, like our pie in the sky, our goal at the end of the day is to eventually see an increase of 10% in the number of Indigenous women, gender diverse, and Two-Spirit people on Halifax Regional Council, advisory boards, and committees by 2027. So it would be lovely if we could see more than a 10% increase, but we wanted to keep things achievable for now. Jared.
Good evening, everyone. I want to start by thanking you all for allowing me to present to you today. My name is Jared Watton. I'm the Coordinator of Indigenous Outreach and Research with the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. This was a great project that I had the pleasure of working on for several months. As part of the campaign school, we worked with the Nova Scotia Advisory Council on the Status of Women to develop these five booklets that we could provide to our participants that would give them the bases they needed to run for or put together a campaign for either an election or joining an advisory board or committee. We just wanted to provide them with some hard, solid skills that they could take away and something they could refer to. So our first booklet we helped design, these are booklets, I should say, by saying, were originally designed by the Nova Scotia Status of Women, Nova Scotia Advisory Council on the Status of Women, for a campaign school that took place in Cape Breton. So we tweaked them slightly to fit HRM's goals. So the first booklet was entitled Deciding to Run. It discussed personal reflections, how it would reflect your personal life. Is there any personal conflicts that you would face? It also helps you weigh the benefits and drawbacks of running for election and helped you building your political resume. So kind of gave participants an idea of what a political resume is, what kind of events they could attend or should be attending, and things like that. Next slide, please. Sure. We also designed this booklet, which is entitled Learning the Political Landscape. So this helped participants on understanding the issues that are affecting Indigenous communities, understanding party politics, identifying your political party. So discussing with participants what party they identified with, if they're running in a election that has political parties, so that would be more federal or provincial, and securing a party nomination, as well as running as an independent and the different qualifications for candidates for various types of elections. As part of this day, we did have presentations on Civics 101 from the Municipal Clerk's Office and also on Mi'kmaq elections. So we kind of went over the different requirements for running in those elections, how they differ, and just kind of give everyone an idea of the different roles that you could take on if you were in, say, municipal elections versus if you ran for a First Nations community election and things like that. Next slide, please. Then we also provided them with a booklet on planning your campaign. So this talked about putting together your campaign team, how to canvass, when to canvass, do's and don'ts, attending public events, getting your face out there, getting your message out there, how to handle debates. It also covered campaign costs and how to budget for your campaign. So we also let them know about the different limitations on when you can and can't fundraise for different elections and things like that. We were lucky enough to have a few individuals that were currently regional council members and also individuals that have sat on boards and committees and were on Indigenous councils to provide some perspective as well during the presentations. We also gave them a booklet on getting your message out there. So discussing that they will make the news if they decide to run, that it's important to choose your words wisely in what you're saying and getting out to the community and your messages. It mentions some key issues, talks about knowing your competition and who you're running against, and how to interact with the media. It talked about developing press releases and doing press conferences, and it also touched on social media. We also brought in a few speakers that talked to this as well and their experiences with social media and running in elections previously. And we also stress the importance of knowing the community that you're running in. So in this case, knowing the history of the Mi'kmaq people and the Mi'kmaq community that you're running in. It's important that you understand different treaties and legal cases that affect the everyday Indigenous life and experience. It's important to understand the history of settler communities and how those communities interact with Indigenous communities. We also stress the importance of understanding the lived realities of the individuals that you will be representing, and community aspirations, systematic barriers, and community statistics. I also wanted to briefly just say thank you to our community partners, so the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the Mi'kmaq Circle of Hope, the Nova Scotia Native Women's Association, and the Nova Scotia Advisory Council on the Status of Women. We couldn't be here today without any of them. And I just wanted to leave you guys off with a few pictures of our lovely speakers from that day. So we were lucky to have Pam Lovelace. Karen Bernard is also pictured there. And spread throughout are some quotes from the day. So build and develop an ethic of care. If you're not on the table, you're on the menu. And that I can do it and speak up and go for it even when I'm scared. So these are quotes that were collected from the feedback statements from our participants that day. We have the lovely Tracy Jones Grant, who provided some lovely opening words that day. Down on the other side, you have Cheryl Capage-Jew, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and another individual from Sipekne'katik, who's a current counselor. I apologize, her name currently escapes me. I believe it's Brooke Willis. And also on the end, we have Nadine Bernard, who was a former employee of HRM, and she also ran as a Liberal Party candidate. So she spoke to her experience there, and it was a lovely session for everyone. And that's it. Happy to answer any questions. Or do we, oh, sorry, I forgot Karen's right after us.
Yes, thank you. You need to unmute.
Yeah, you're muted.
Thank
There
you.
we go. Thank you. It was a really well-planned event. We had multiple meetings leading up to this event. The location I liked, but what made it difficult was the location again in regards to participants coming into that area. And that's always going to be an issue with our people, getting them to an area, because what's always expected is some kind of form of transportation to get them there. Not everybody can just get in a car because normally they don't have a car. In our communities, there's no transit system to get them to an area. For instance, and I'm going to compare the two campaign schools that we did. We did one in HRM, of course, and we did one in Member 2. But the Member 2 one was not called a campaign school. It was called a leadership school. So we gave it different names. The leadership school, we did this during August of 2020 during the pandemic, when we had that little window of opportunity when the numbers were really low for COVID. And then we did it in HRM. But we called it campaign school. We called it a political thing. So because we called it a political thing, it seemed to me, and this is how I viewed it, that we didn't have the interest of all the Indigenous women that wanted to come to it, because it was no longer titled as a Indigenous leadership piece. So when we talk about leadership within our communities, we're talking about women that are in roles, not political roles all the time, but they're in a community role. They may be that elder with that knowledge. They may be a director of children's services, for instance. So those women that have these roles that are mentors to other women in the community. Because another thing about the communities and elections is that, and I'm reading and I'm listening to the presentations and things, is you have to raise funds, I guess. You have to have a campaign fund. Within First Nations elections, you don't need that. You don't need 1 cent to run your little campaign. You just got to visit people in your community, because you already know everybody in your community. So for our people to fundraise, I think that's a big ask. And I think it's a difficult ask for our people to go, our women especially, to go out and do something as big as that. And there are a few that have done it. Nadine is probably one of our biggest women that's out there that has taken on that role, that has done that whole journey of running in such an election. And she did very well for an Indigenous woman. So the campaign school in Halifax was very well supported. The pieces that were created, the manuals were really, really, they were good. They were nice. They were a nice little guide piece to have that the women in the rest of the province that are not part of Halifax still want. They want those copies. And I've noticed not Halifax, I know it's the Women's Advisory Council is now doing another campaign school. I think it's like an online call, I think that they put out there. And I think until we come back to calling it a leadership school within our community and having an actual central location for everybody to come and meet is when we'll get that interest back. And when we did it in Membertou, it wasn't only Indigenous women. It was a diverse group of women that came together, that were brought together as part of that diversity, that part of leadership. Not everybody was at the political table. Even though we had amazing women at the political table in the room, we had other women leaders, we had other grandmothers, we had other types of knowledge keepers, not just Indigenous either. Like I said, it was a variety of women. And I think that part there is a key in supporting women in politics again, because one of the things about women, and I'll say it, we are jealous of each other. When women start succeeding, women start getting jealous. It's a known thing that I have seen over the years, especially in our communities. So how do we create that balance? Well, we have the leadership part without calling it a political part. And that part right there, I find, is where we start bringing in those, what you call like the respect piece that we have for each other of whatever our role is. So for myself, I've never sat in a political chair such as chief or council, but I sat with the advisory council for almost 5 years on that table. And one of the things for myself is that I've been well respected in my community and remain so as a woman in leadership. I run my own business now. I no longer work for anybody, but I'm highly, highly respected in that sense because I'm not at the political table, but I'm about empowering women. I'm about healthy communities. I'm about bringing back knowledge and culture. Because one of the things that we got to remember in our communities with the loss of the knowledge and culture became the loss of identity. And we no longer hold that pride of who we are as Indigenous people. So my job here, and along with a few other knowledge keepers, is bringing those teachings back to our people in order to create healthy communities, stronger identities, and have our young people start encompassing who they want to be as Indigenous people, not just somebody, and that term, that racist term, and I'm going to say the racist term about Indigenous people because they would refer to us as a drunken, dumb Indian. And because that term is still kind of there a little bit, and our communities do have a lot of addiction issues, but until we start empowering them to grasp back to their culture, then therefore we will have even healthier communities. I've seen men and women that have had issues with their leadership in their community from a personal level of who they were and why they were like that. But until they grabbed onto their identity and their culture, they became this healthy leader in the community again. So that's one of the things that we need within our communities. And I'm going to say that a lot of our diverse communities, our minority communities, are struggling with these issues of systemic racism within political settings, or even just the way we are viewed. Oh, hold on a second.
Great. I'm assuming Karen's going to come back. Oh, yeah, there she is.
I was cooking. I'm cooking. I'm sorry about that. So that's just what I'd like to see, I think, is bring it back to a form of leadership. Let's take out that political piece again and bring those women back together. We started doing our grandmothers and bringing our grandmothers together as part of our guidance and guiding us as young women and younger women. But bringing it back to that term of leadership, and not with the political piece, but the leadership encompasses so much as a woman, not just politics, but what a healthy leader in their community could look like as a healthy matriarch. Because I'll tell you another thing that's happening with some of our leaders, and it's across the country. I know I've seen this, I've watched it. And some of our beautiful matriarch leaders are becoming patriarchal leaders as women. And that those, I don't know, those controls, that power, that anger that's coming out onto other people, it's not a healthy thing. It's not a good thing. So trying to create some kind of balance so that our matriarchs still have that care, that love, that encouragement, but not that control. So that's my little spiel about the whole event. But I was glad the event happened and it was well supported. The women that did come were very, very happy to be there. They were very pleased with the giveaways, the meals, the setting. And I think we just need to change the word of campaign to leadership. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Thank you. Tracy, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think Miss Karen is absolutely correct. And we did acknowledge that when we had to change the date when we were doing it. So when in consultation with our partners and with Cheryl, we did actually call it, we gave it a different title as opposed to just campaign school. But I do think we need to go a step further. I think some good points have been raised. And as we look at doing more work on encouraging diverse women to be in positions of leadership, we can do it differently as we move forward.
Great. Thanks very much, Tracy. And thank you, Jared, for your presentation, and Bailey as well. So we'll go to our speakers list. Liz, we'll start with you.
Thanks very much for the presentation, and thanks for your remarks, Karen. I was really struck by something you said at the end where you're saying, you know, some matriarchal leaders are becoming patriarchal. And I think it's such a good reminder that when we are talking about redressing oppression and moving from marginalization to the center, these are systems that were not built for us. Like, we are talking about trying to find ways to bridge people into systems that were not built for them. And that's a really important first step, but I think it's really important for everyone on this community to have the mindset that it shouldn't be the last step, that part of change is going to come from changing those systems so that they are built to include people. An adversarial way of distributing power is one that is very specific to a particular model of how a society should be run, electing people through competition instead of consensus, and having narrow perspectives, as you pointed out, having narrow perspectives of what leadership can and should mean. These are like very culturally specific concepts, and concepts that come from a gendered lens of power. So I think really important reminders for all of us to be thinking about the short term of redressing immediate inequalities, but also the long term of how we would rethink and rebuild our systems.
Great, thank you, Liz. Hannah, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you for the update and for all the information. I don't have any questions at this time.
Thanks, Hannah. Councillor Lovelace.
Thanks for this presentation. So I was there and I really enjoyed it. It was a great event. You know, I've been to a number of campaign schools over the last decade and a bit. I have to say that taking a sort of a new perspective. I would like to see more of these leadership events. I think that, there's just so much potential in reaching people and letting them know that they are welcome in this space in politics. It's not easy to convince a person. I've actually been interviewing people and recruiting people to run for council for this next election. And, it's a hard thing for people to understand what the job is and how do you switch from being, just a person who goes about doing your life to then being in public office. I've lost friends from becoming a politician because people don't like politicians. Some people don't like politicians. But I think, it's really, really difficult when we're talking about individuals who have already experienced oppression, have already experienced the challenges of just moving things forward in their community that they want to see genuinely create change. And there's an incredible power that's created when you get all of these people together in one room, which we did. And I mean, I know Karen mentioned this, like the friendships, the collective kind of ideal of, oh, all of us in this room, that's what leadership looks like. This is what a politician could be. We could also be on the ballot. We could do this. And so it's a real interesting mind shift because going home and going back to your community after you experience this mind shift of, wait a minute, I could actually be on the ballot. It's incredible. And and I was just talking to another counselor earlier today. Being on council or being in public service is life changing. Mm-hmm. And so people need to be prepared for that. And I think having it named campaign school almost minimizes really what it is. And I agree, I think, and thank you for mentioning that about the difference between campaign school and leadership. And people are more interested in coming out to a leadership because they can see what that is, right? They can kind of idealize what a leader, what they think a leader is. So, there's a lot of stigmas to address. There's a lot of history to address when it comes to non-white male leaders in our society, right? And how we need to put out our elbows and make room for one another. So, yeah, I think it's just incredible to experience that. And I look forward to having more and more of these events where we can continue to make space for voices that have not been at the leadership table and absolutely deserve to be. So thank you. It was a great day, and I look forward to the next one.
Thank you, Councillor Lovelace. Appreciate that. Over to you, please, Jane.
Well, let me say first to Pam, thank you for those comments. I just really wholeheartedly agree with what Pam has said, and I just so appreciate the energy that I know that comes when you bring people into a room with kind of some shared experience that they don't even know about, and that how they can bear each other up and how such great things can happen. So really appreciate those comments, Pam. Also, I want to say thank you to you three for your presentations. I really enjoyed hearing what you had to say, Karen, and also Jared. And I just have a question for you, Jared. This is kind of a technical question, just because I'm a curious person and I always have questions. So I think you said that that the goal was to increase involvement in sort of committees, boards, and so on by 10%. Did I get that right? Was that what you said?
Yes, that was included in the presentation. It was actually Bailey that said that, though, not
Oh,
myself.
sorry, Bailey.
No worries.
Sorry. Okay. Well, see, I told you. So Bailey. So you were talking about an increase in the sort of Indigenous population or representatives on the various communities and boards and so on by 10%. Is that right? Okay.
Yep, between 2023 and 2027.
Okay, so over a period of time. So I love that. I love numbers. I love having concrete goals. I think that's wonderful. But it sort of makes me ask the question of Aboriginal or Indigenous population. So what percentage of the population of the HRM is Indigenous?
Jared.
So I don't know the percentage actually, but I believe based off the last Stats Canada that I saw, which would have been the 2016 stats, so it is a little outdated. At that time, we had around 15, almost 16,000 individuals in HRM that identified as Indigenous. Oh,
So
I see Tracy has her hand up. She might have an updated stat for you.
No, I don't have an updated stat, but what I think is important is not the stat of how many people. When you have a group of individuals that have been historically underrepresented, even if that group only represents 2% of the population, that's 2% that's been behind for generations. And when we're talking about that 10%, when we were doing this campaign school, it wasn't just to have 10% representation on HRM committees and boards. We did talk about leadership. So our focus was to encourage women, our gender diverse communities, our 2S LGBTQ plus and 2-spirited communities, to increase their numbers overall in leadership opportunities and positions. And then the question might be, well, how do you measure that? One of our hopes is that we will reconnect and see where people are in a year's time. I liked Ms. Karen's comment about bringing people back together. So that's something that we can consider. But I struggle a bit when we put numbers like 10% and then want to compare it to population size. Because communities, marginalized communities, underrepresented communities are trying to play catch up. So sometimes we need to overrepresent to equalize the playing field because we've been underrepresented for so long. So I just struggle a little bit with making the comparison to the actual population numbers. I don't know, Ms. Karen, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah. Can I respond to you, Tracy? So
Sure.
I wasn't asking the question because I was looking for, well, there's 10, what percentage or what percentage. I was asking the question because to me, if the population is small, which I think it is, it just indicates how much more challenging it is to engage them in leadership. We don't have a big pool. That was my point. I'm not trying to say, oh well, it should only be this big. I totally agree with if you've been underrepresented, a little bit of over representation would be a good thing. But it's going to be more challenging when we have such a small population to draw from. And then the other thing is that we have a problem with people being willing to self-identify, right? People that apply for committees and boards and so on have to self-identify. Nobody's saying, well, you get to say whether or not, and so we want to encourage that. We want to encourage people that are of Indigenous or population to be free to share that information, feel safe to share that information. The same with all of the marginalized groups. So that was mine.
So I'd like to speak on that when we talk about the self-identification. That's where we have real issues coming in though. So we have people identifying as Indigenous have no ancestry with being Indigenous. Anybody can identify as that and sit into a seat, take that role, take that job. So the 15,000 that are identifying as Indigenous might even be a smaller pool of actual Indigenous people who have the status of being Indigenous. So that's where we also have another problem, those who identify as. I just want to say that, yeah.
And although there might be a smaller pool, and it is harder to draw from a smaller group, I think there is some strengths too in not trying to reach masses of people. So there are some advantages because you can create sometimes stronger relationships. So Councillor Lovelace was talking about, I'm reaching out to community members. I'm trying to draw people in. So when we look at encouraging our Indigenous and Two-Spirit community to get engaged, we do have a smaller group to engage with perhaps, but we can build stronger relationships. So it's almost a balance in some respects. And I think we will get there, and maybe not in HRM, because it's different being in HRM than if I'm in Cape Breton, where I have larger community to surround me and support me. In HRM community, the urban Indigenous community is so diverse, it's sometimes harder to wrap your arms around people than when you are closer to your community. So if we don't have the success necessarily in HRM, maybe we'll see it in Cape Breton, maybe we'll see it in Truro and in other locations, but it's still an opportunity for us to kind of celebrate seeing women, Indigenous women, two-spirited women involved in leadership.
Great, thanks, Tracy. So we're going to wrap up this section of the agenda unless there are any other questions for our presenters. Any other questions? Okay, well then again, thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. Thank you, Karen, for being here and walking us through your experience with that. That was really lovely and very powerful. Thank you for that. Elizabeth, I see you on the screen. Did you have something you needed to share with us at this point?
Nope, all good here.
All good. Okay. Again, thank you, Karen. Thank you, Bailey. Thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Jared. Appreciate your time with us. Thank you. Okay, so we'll moving on to 7.1 correspondence. So to Elizabeth, was there any correspondence received by the clerk's office?
No correspondence was received by the clerk's office.
Thank you. Item 7.2 petitions. Were there any petitions received by the clerk's office?
There were no petitions received.
Thank you. So moving on to item 8, information items brought forward. There were none. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Sorry, I hate to break in. Can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Because we added an item to the agenda under added
Yes.
items that was in relation to correspondence that was received.
Yes.
So I feel confused. Please help.
So I can speak to that. So for correspondence refers to correspondence that was received that's relevant to a specific agenda item. So in this case, where general correspondence was received, that wouldn't be noted on the agenda or during correspondence, as Jane was the one that added that item on and chose to add that item onto the agenda. So correspondence is specifically asking for correspondence that is relevant to the agenda.
Okay, thank you for helping. I understand now.
Okay, thanks. So let's move on then. So we are on 9.2.1. Councillor Lovelace, you'll provide an update, I understand, on behalf of Councillor Kent.
Yes, and I haven't received anything from Councillor Kent, so please, I apologize. I didn't realize I was going to be doing this, so I'm going to be really quick. I wanted to let committee members know that budget. So budget is it's a long process at the municipality. We spend many months reviewing every single business unit in the municipality. They come forward to budget committee, they present their business plan, and council decides to add or take away things or change things in some way. So I just wanted to let you know that the final budget should be approved and finalized by the end of November, April 23rd. This week, we've finalized corporate services, financial services, the police budget. Last week was Halifax Regional Fire and Emergency, transit. So really at this point, it's just the machinations of all of the little other bits and pieces which we call the budget adjustment list. So that is the BAL. And that BAL has added items on it. So we will continue to discuss those. If you have any questions at all about the budget, you just go to halifax.ca/budget. And everything is there, all the links to all the different business units and so on and so forth. This year, it's actually quite historic in that the municipality, for the first time in almost 30 years, actually has a community safety budget. So the municipality at amalgamation in 1996 lost all aspects to social services. We haven't had housing, homelessness, social services, income assistance, any of those kinds of things since the early 90s. This year, the municipality has accepted a $13 million budget for community safety. And what that does is it has detasked police in various different places, including like crossing guards, for example, and moved into a community safety budget. And community safety is primarily working with homelessness, working with the Provincial Department of Community Services, mental health and addictions. We're looking at partnering with the province to get a wellness center, which is also known as a sobering center, which is a drop-in center rather than having police take someone who's inebriated on the street and putting them in the jail cell, which is not what you do. We would actually have a facility for these individuals to go to be safe and to receive the help and support that they need. So that being said, again, it's all online. The other thing I wanted to mention to you is that I think it was last year we had a presentation. Winnie Brown came to the Women's Advisory Committee, gave a presentation on human trafficking. And I've met with Winnie since then on a few different things, actually looking at ways that we can partner and help Wendell Brown get a center in place, which would be a support center for survivors of human trafficking. And I was able to get a Halifax Regional Police in to actually sit down and provide a lunch and learn to counselors. So this was the first time that counselors have actually received a really in-depth conversation with HRP about human trafficking, about the state of that criminality here and what to watch for, how to work with families, schools, networks, and so on and so forth. So that was really good. In addition to that, council met on Tuesday. You can see the agenda online, but one of the things I think that's really, really important is there's two big plans coming forward. One is the regional plan phase 5. So that's looking at, again, more and more growth nodes, development, how this is going to actually look in the municipality to advance and extend urban services such as pipe water and pipe sewer. And in addition to that, the second big plan is the Housing Accelerator Fund. So that program funded by the federal government is moving forward to create changes on the ground for the urban service boundary, primarily the peninsula, but there are a number, I think there's up to 30 suburban site specific areas throughout Herring Cove and Fairview and so on, that actually look at ways to create density within the suburban area. So that you can find all the fun stuff, and there's an interactive map to play with to see what the before and after looks like for various different streets. Halifax.ca/HAF for Housing Accelerator Fund. And all the details are there. People are more than welcome to provide their input. And as always, email clerks@halifax.ca to provide your input, your complaints, your kudos, anything that you wish to comment on any item that the municipality has undertaken or is about to undertake. You can certainly just email your thoughts to the clerk's office, and that gets shared to all of council, senior management, and so on. Madam Chair, I respectfully submit my council report. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Lovely. Are there any questions? Jane?
So Pam, that was great to hear that report. And I just want to kind of reinforce your message that about the human trafficking and remind the committee that came about because of a committee meeting. One of the things that we talked about in November was wanting to know what's the impact of what we do, what's the outcome, and this is an example of an outcome that is remarkable and certainly a credit to you and your hard work and your continual focus on the needs of the people in the HRM. So thank you, Pam. Thank you for that, and thank you for letting us know about it.
Yes, thank you, Jane. And that's the great work that advisory committees do. Is advisory committees have the opportunity to change the minds, change the policy, and open up discussions on things at the council table. So that's what we've done, and I thank you for and Winnie, of course. I thank Winlyn Brown, and in fact, I hope to see her next week or the week after. So, you know, these are great, strong relationships that started right here with this committee. So thank you.
Winnie loves you, Councillor Lovelace, and she talks very highly of you frequently.
Oh, well, I love her right back.
Thanks for that. Any other questions? Liz, did you have any questions? No? Okay, any other? No? Okay, so thank you very much, Councillor Lovelace, for that update and report. So we'll keep moving along. We are on to 9.3.2. We're having a discussion about meeting dates and times. And I wanted to ask the question. Yep, sorry, Elizabeth, go ahead, please.
I think you may have skipped over 9.3.1, the
Oh, sorry.
discussion on the admin order terms of reference.
Yep, sorry about that. Absolutely. So 9.3.1 Administrative Order 2019-004-GOV respecting the Women's Advisory Committee in the HRM. So I just wanted to just briefly say a couple things, and this is just simply meant for discussion. This is not meant to create any sort of wear and tear on this group, but I just was reflecting on the sort of the purpose, if you will, of the Women's Committee. And I had a couple of questions about it. And again, this is something that no doubt Councillor Lovelace and Elizabeth and others who are more knowledgeable than I am about this can tell me sort of if there are things in here that could potentially be changed. How does that happen? And I'll just preface it with the world I come from. There's a policy refresh every 4 or 5 years, depending on the nature of what it is, what the document is that you're looking at. And so that's kind of where that came from. So I was looking at what was developed in 2019, and I was reflecting on the federal gender equality laws in Canada and legislation that has changed over time. And one of the major concerns that I sort of happened across in looking at federal gender equality laws was, what are we actually doing in provinces? So I looked at it and shared, I think, at least one example with you, Jane, and the committee that's coming from PEI, and it's the language usage. I think it reflects in part what's happening at the federal level and maybe a potential disconnect of what's happening at the provincial level. And this is something that Karen Bernard spoke about in her presentation around, excuse me, the fact that identity matters. And the sort of language we use matters in terms of erasure. So if people don't see themselves necessarily included, do they actually feel like this is something that they want to get involved in? And so I just wanted to, if I may, just mention that in Canada, the sort of foundation of gender equality can be found in the Human Rights Act, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And at the federal level, these rights are further defined through, for example, the Employment Equity Act, Pay Equity Act, Canadian Gender Budgeting Act. And so one of the things that all of these, including the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, specifically states is that all Canadians, this is a quote from the federal government website, all Canadians have the right to equality, equal opportunity, fair treatment, and an environment free of discrimination on the basis of sex, sexual orientation, marital status, family status, etc. And then as you kind of go through this, material and you get to WAGE, which is the federal government Department of Women and Gender Equality, they do specifically say that in addition to its previous responsibilities when it was Status of Women Canada, the department also is looking at issues of sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression through the inclusion of people of all genders, including women in Canada's economic, social, and political life. I won't continue because you can go on the Government of Canada website and have a look yourself. So one of the questions I had was, with respect to this committee, do we see all of the populations that we would necessarily want to embrace in the work that we're doing in how we describe ourselves? And so one question that I had was, you know, when we talk about a women's committee, does that include more gender diverse people? Does that include Two-Spirit people? And I know we have that listed in our terms right now, that we do include those populations. So I'm putting it out there as food for thought more than I am trying to change what's there. And I don't know if Elizabeth, if you want to speak to the process for, not the process for establishing this committee, but the process for rethinking going forward what this committee is focused on. And that's, and I know we've had Tracy give us a brief presentation when we got started about the origins of this committee. And I'm saying this with all due respect and also with you know, pleading a bit of ignorance in terms of the process. I'll stop there.
Can I just speak to what's happened in the past? Elizabeth might not know about this.
Sure.
The administrative order has already been changed once.
Right.
And the process, we added the word racialized. We added a second or an 11th member who was a racialized person. And the process was pretty simple. The committee made a recommendation to the Executive Standing Committee. The Executive Standing Committee approved it, and it went to the council. So it just, and it might be different now, Elizabeth, but I'm just telling you that there is a history of us already doing that.
Thanks, Jane. Appreciate that. Elizabeth, did you want to add to that?
Sure. As far as I understand, just kind of what Jane referenced, that is how you would make any changes or request any changes. The committee would have to pass a motion, making a recommendation to the ESC, which would then go to Regional Council. I don't know if Councillor Lovelace or Tracy, I know you had a big part in the establishment of the Women's Advisory Committee. I don't know if you can speak to that or add a bit more detail.
No, I agree. It's basically, as Jane has said, when you can review it, the existing administrative order, and then if you have recommendations for change, then that can always go up to Executive Standing Committee, who can agree or disagree with your changes. If they agree, they move it forward to ratification to Regional Council.
Thanks. Make it sound so simple, Tracy. Thank you for that. So other folks, Councillor Lovelace, did you want to weigh in on this question?
Sorry, Madam Chair. No, someone just stepped into my office. It's all good.
Okay, thank you. Liz or Hannah?
Oh boy, I have so many things to weigh in about, but perhaps I will spare you if this is going to be a discussion that's going to be more reopened in a more fulsome way at another time, or maybe this is the fulsome discussion day, in which case no one will be spared.
Yeah, no, it's not the fulsome discussion day.
Okay.
It was just to put it out there as a discussion for short term. We can all review and then reassemble at our next meeting, have a more fulsome conversation. But your thoughts are certainly welcome, Liz.
I will keep them brief then. The abbreviated version of Liz's thoughts are: I am in support of a review of the name and terms of reference of the committee. I think that I understand that the intent of the committee is to address marginalization due to sex and gender. And I think that if our aim is to address marginalization due to sex and gender, we have to recognize that cis women are very marginalized in some areas of our society, and that trans, two-spirit, and non-binary people experience a different marginalization. And although we are not in the business of playing oppression Olympics, I think it's safe to say that marginalization is more extensive and more dangerous. The identity piece is important. The visibility piece is important and challenging. But you would never know by my she, elle pronouns on my Zoom, but I'm not really into the gender binary myself as it happens. And it is challenging. The specificity of the term women is challenging when I think we're actually trying to address quite a broad problem. I look forward to a more fulsome discussion of the aims of the committee and how best to achieve them and what specific objectives we could think about with regard to examining the impact of gender on municipal policies and the people living in the HRM. But I would just say I would hope to see this revisited soon and in depth.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Liz. I appreciate that. Other comments or questions, Hannah or Jane? Yes, Councillor Lovelace, please go ahead.
Thank you. So I think what we need to understand is the intent of the original motion of council. And that was specifically to look at, I'm just going to read here, the impact of municipal policies, programs, and services on women. Mm-hmm. So because that is the, very specific about that gender being women, or that group of individuals who identify as women, the language is exclusive, which is inherently against what we're trying to do with inclusivity, right? Which I think, Madam Chair, is exactly the point that you're making. That if we are, as a advisory group, feeling like we ourselves are only addressing a specific population, when in fact it could be much more inclusive, I would be in favor of that, and actually recognizing, and I'd love to see this conversation actually at executive committee and at council, because I think it's important for those decision makers to understand that. And I think some people may be uncomfortable, quite frankly. I do think that, and yes, I am a cis woman, but that being said, I've been working in this space for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And it takes a while to help people adjust their language, to help people adjust their practices. You cannot do that until you enter into that uncomfortable conversation to help people understand why it is that this title of this committee and this terms of reference actually should be adjusted to be much more inclusive, because currently, Madam Chair, it is exclusive language that we're using. So that's it for me, and I look forward to the conversation, and I will be there at executive if this moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lovelace. Yes, Jane, please go ahead.
So I just a brief comment on the exclusivity of the title. It excludes men. So we have to think about, if you don't want it to be exclusive, do you want it to include men? The US or the federal government statement says all genders. Mm-hmm. So that includes men. And it says all genders before women. Women came sort of as an afterthought, including women. Mm-hmm. The equality of all genders, including women. So I didn't much like the Government of Canada's mission statement for that reason.
Sure. Thanks, Jane. Liz, please go ahead.
So I can't say I'm speaking as a Fed, because I'm not speaking as a Fed. The following remarks do not represent the opinions of the federal government. I will just say it's very common practice in the federal government that when you include additional specificity, it's actually to break out a subgroup to give them more priority. So to say all genders, including women, within sort of federal government language would normally be understood to say like all genders, and we especially want to highlight women. That's just the first piece, because I hate to think that people are unhappy with the federal government, which of course is perfect in every way. But I also want to speak to that question of, do we include cis men? And I think that's a really good topic for a future discussion, because it depends really, truly, on what we think is the aim of the committee. If the aim of the committee is solely to examine the impacts of gender, or sex and gender, if we want to, be really expansive about it, on policies, on the life of citizens, then yes, we would want to consider impacts that are specific to being a cis man. And we do know that there are some health impacts, for example, I'm just speaking in my own wheelhouse, there are some health impacts that do actually disproportionately impact cis men, like suicidality, death by violence. And that's because patriarchal constructs of masculinity tend to disproportionately isolate men. We often talk about the epidemic of male loneliness, and that is the way in which patriarchal gender policies are disproportionately impacting and harming cis men. So if what we want to do is explore the ways in which the choices that we make as a municipality are informed by gender politics and our societal understanding of gender, and how that in turn impacts on the bodies and experiences of people in HRM, then yes, we would want to also consider cis men. We could also choose to say, actually, this is a committee about exploring the impact of marginalization, in which case we would not explore the impact on cis men, because cis men are not a marginalized group. They are the center around which our society is built, and bless them for it. I hope they're enjoying it. So in that case, like we would choose not to exclude that group, because I'm sure we all hold them in the highest regard and affection, but issues that deal with impacts on them would be out of scope for the committee, because they would not be related to marginalization. I think that'd be a fruitful topic if we were to open this up and sort of examine those pieces.
Thank you for that, Liz. So I do think the part of the question for me came about in the application of our work plan, where we're expected to talk to SGBA plus, and a plus being intersectionality. So then when I looked at the groups that are specifically being invited to the table, we're talking about it from an intersectional lens or intersectional framing. There are populations that are missing. And so I did a little scan of what other similar sort of women's communities or committees are called, and they don't just have women, they often have women and gender diverse people's committee. So so let's put a pin in that. It'll be lots of fun talking about this in a more fulsome fashion, as Liz says, when we get together next time. So it's not meant to diminish the importance of this committee. It's not meant to take away from the original intent. But if part of our mandate and part of our work plan is around SGBA plus, I think we as a committee need to think about, what does the plus mean, and be living that plus in the way that we understand what this committee is set up to do. So anyway, I'll just leave it there unless there are any other comments or questions. And then we'll put this on our next agenda, if that's okay with people. Can I just get a little bit of a head nodding or head bobbing, thumbs up? Thank you, Councillor Lovelace. Okay, so let's move on then to 9.3.2, discussion of meeting dates and times. So we have a whole roster of meeting dates coming up. If I could find, that would be super helpful. So we have, do we want to pull that up on the screen?
I can share that on the screen. It'll just be one moment there.
Thank you. And I did have a question about the schedule of meetings and the possibility of meeting in person. And I would just tell you that I have had people informally say to me, getting to an in-person meeting at 4:30, I might as well just go run in traffic with scissors, because it's so hard to get downtown, find parking, get to the meeting, etc. So I think the idea is not just about what's the date for those, but is there an appetite to doing something? And I think I may have mentioned this to Elizabeth, like, can we, and I know that hybrid is not an option. So thinking about, do we want to do something big and spectacular once a year in person, have a meeting and then do something else? Or do we want to continue to sort of do the occasionally we meet in person and otherwise we're meeting online? So that's the list. Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for pulling that up. And so just thoughts on this, because it's 4:30 to 6:30 currently, and it's the first Thursday of the month where possible. So thoughts on that? Yes, sorry, Jane, your tiny hand is up in the corner of the screen. Go ahead.
Sorry. All I wanted to suggest, Jackie, is that you delay this decision or conversation for another month or two, where you should have 4 or 5 new members.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
those 4 or 5 new members, it might change the water on the beans. So that I was just gonna suggest that you delay it. I think it's a great discussion, but delay it.
Yeah. Well, just from my perspective, it would be good to know whether the first Thursday of the month for this current gaggle of folks works. And if it doesn't, then it's something that for sure we can bring forward when we've got new people on board. But I've seen people sort of rotate off the committee, largely because they've got other things happening in their lives and they've left. But when we had a fuller crew of people, that was a common thing I heard, and is the getting downtown for 4:30 was challenging. So I'm just putting it out there. If there's a preliminary sort of sense of the first Thursday of the month doesn't work and the 4:30 to 6:30 is not ideal, can we, as this current group, have a little bit of a brainstorm on that, and then we can bring that forward, Jane, when we have the new group of folks joining us and say, we've had this conversation, this is the sense of the group. Hannah, I see your hand up, please go ahead.
Yeah, I am happy with it still being the first Thursday of the month. I'm also very happy with it being this current time frame. Any later and my brain starts to deal with mush. I'm going through some health struggles, so I can't commit to attending a meeting and being fully present if it is going to be later in the evening. So I'm all for still doing 4:30. That being said, I personally don't care if it's in person or on Zoom. My meeting is on Hollis Street, or my main office is on Hollis Street. So I'm downtown and I've already run through traffic with scissors. That's my new favorite insult, by the way. That's fantastic. So I'm there, and location doesn't matter to me, but timing will impact me if it moves into later in the evening.
Okay. That's beautiful. Thank you, Hannah, for that. That was very concise. Appreciate that. Liz, please, over to you.
Yes, I am fortunate to be in mostly good health, but my brain also turns to mush at about 7 p.m. Because I have a child. So I wake up at 5 in the morning. I quite like to meet in person. That's a personal preference, but I recognize that that may not be possible for everyone for a variety of reasons. And as we are moving out of cold and flu season, I feel like it might be nice to sort of strike while the iron is hot, just from my public health lens, where we can enjoy our time together with reduced risk of making each other disgusting. I also enjoy the privilege of working downtown, so for me, that's less of a barrier.
Terrific. Thank you, Liz. Anybody else want to chime in? Councillor Lovelace, how are you feeling about this?
My calendar's a mess. So there's a lot in there, to be frank. If things get moved around, then I may not be able to attend regularly. This is in my calendar now as is. So, but that being said, in person, I'd love to have you all come down to Halifax Hall and hang out. But at the same time, virtual is just so accessible, and it's also accessible for our presenters. So just, keeping that in mind as well. I do think that it's nice for us to get together as often as possible. But I also think that, based on, dependent upon the presenters, sometimes it's really important to be in person when we're talking about, critical issues. So anyway, you're all welcome to come to Halifax Hall. I'd love to see you.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it, Councillor Lovelace. So I think we'll take the sort of no later than 6:30. That's pretty loud and clear. The first Thursday still resonates with people, and the in-person versus not in-person. So maybe I'm the whingy one that has trouble getting from the Bedford Highway downtown. Apologies, but I did hear it from other folks too, and I wonder maybe that's why they're not here. So let's just put a pin in that for now. If that's okay, Elizabeth, we'll just carry on as we are right now. So our next meeting will be virtual, and then I get the sense that once we have the possibility of warmer weather and not so fluey and stinky and whatever that's happening, we can get together in person. So maybe May, we can think about getting together in person, but next time we'll get together virtual, we'll get together this way. And then once we have our new crew onboarded, then we can have this discussion again and see if things need to change to meet with what's the consensus of the big group. How about that? Okay, sweet, thank you. So we're moving on then to number 10. So this is over to 10.1, application of GBA plus to planning and development policy. So we would invite Jane to lead the discussion.
So this is just dealing with the questions that were posed in the correspondence that was circulated to you. And I think Elizabeth has these 2 questions.
I am just pasting those questions in the group chat so everyone can take a look at them. Just hold on 1 second.
So Elizabeth, may I read those questions out loud?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So these are questions addressed to our committee. The first one says, how do developers and the planning department consider a gendered and intersectional lens when proposals come forward and during the community engagement portion of decision-making? If not, how are these decisions linked to the HRM social policy framework, which aims to build communities that are safe, welcoming, and healthy for all? That's the first question. The second question was a gendered intersectional lens applied to the impact of redeveloping the building where the Ward 5 and North End daycare are currently located? So those questions were put to the committee. As far as I know, my experience is that we can't answer those questions. We don't know the answer to those questions. And so to me, the appropriate response is to have our staff consider not our staff, but the staff of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, consider those questions, do a little bit of research for us, and come back to us in, I don't know, a month or 2 months with some information so that we could formulate a response. So I guess the question is to Tracy, is that a fair request of your office to help us gather some information so that we might respond appropriately to these questions?
Yes, so through you, Madam Chair, to the member, this letter also did come to our office and it went to Councillor Smith. And so we have been tasked with trying to formulate a response to Caroline. I don't actually have any answers. I don't know what the planning process or the development process was for Ward 5. I was actually quite surprised when I saw the letter. I didn't know Ward 5 was being redeveloped or had been sold. My kids went there. So, so anyways, we will gather some information and do some follow-up because of course the counselor will require a response and we will also respond to the team. I can't say how quickly we can do it, but because we're just finding information, we should be able to have an answer for the next meeting. It doesn't mean that we have necessarily an influence. So I guess that would be the conversation the committee would have to have, but we should be able to at least answer those 2 questions that were brought to the Women's Advisory Committee and the counselor.
Thank you, Tracy. And I see, sorry, Councillor Lovelace.
I was just going to say that's great.
Sorry, over to you, Councillor Lovelace.
Thank you for that, Tracy. I think that you know, these are interesting questions. They have been raised in other contexts. So, for example, with regards to climate action and looking at how it is that planning and development are taking into effect and realizing the Green Network Plan, Halifax Climate Action Plan, you know, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's worthwhile to find the answers from staff and actually have a discussion at the next Women's Advisory meeting with planning to get a better understanding from them what they know about this committee and how it is that this committee could be working with planning. So, Madam Chair, if you want to just put that on a request for the next agenda for the clerk's office, I think it would be really important for us to raise this directly with planning. So, Tracy, let's see how we can get the conversation started and get some answers. But, you know, I think this also helps us look at our work plan. Yeah. So let's get some answers, invite them to meet with us and give us a presentation specifically to how GBA Plus is actually being considered. Sound good?
That's lovely. Thank you, Councillor Lovelace. So Elizabeth will make a note of that. Then we'll invite planning to our next meeting and have them discuss how they're including GBA Plus in their decisions to do their planning work. It's great. Are there any other questions, comments?
Could I just sort of reinforce that when we invite planning, we'd like, I would like, not just sort of the generalities, but I would like the answers to these specific questions.
Yes.
Like, was it considered with regard to Ward 5 and the North End daycare? And so
yeah,
the big picture and the specifics.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Tracy?
So my thought is that might be two different pieces. So the specific answers about Ward 5 might be somebody who could answer those, but the whole discussion on including a GBA Plus lens to overall planning, that might be somebody different. So so maybe at agenda review, Madam Chair, we can talk about what that looks like, because it's no sense having this conversation if we've got a bunch of other things on the agenda. If we really want to get into it, you want to provide that time for that conversation, especially if they're two big pieces that we want to talk about, and be clear about who we're inviting from planning. So just my only thing here is let's consider how much time, and it might be one of those things where that's what we want to focus on that meeting and not have, you know, maybe other guests or other agenda items.
Thank you.
I think it'd be a great discussion.
Thank you for that advice, Tracy. Councillor Lovelace, please.
Thank you. So just on that note, I think it is important to recognize the first question, which clearly indicates the social policy framework that HRM has implemented. That social policy framework is supposed to be, you know, assisting the overall organization, the municipality, to be creating decisions with the social policy framework in mind. So I think that bigger issue is really important, and staff need to come to this committee to talk about that. The other issue, which is very specific to one site and one site development and that development permits and so on. Yes, you're right. That is a totally different and separate discussion. That being said, that separate discussion would need to be informed by the first question, which looks at that bigger piece of the social policy framework and the GBA Plus, you know, implementation, I guess you would say. So, you know, just because number 2 is there, I think there are probably plenty of other examples of development, such as the removal of affordable housing and how that actually impacts low-income single mothers, for example, or single parents. I think that it's important for us to consider not just the Ward 5, but yes, that question did come to us specifically. But I think that we've got a bigger conversation that needs to take place. And you're right, it may not be planning, but that social policy framework and how it's being implemented by planning and development, that is a planning and development conversation.
Thank you, Councillor Lovelace. Liz, over to you, please.
If I may be so bold, recognizing that we're about to go over time, I think the question of what happened with one specific development or planning application is an email. I don't think that's a presentation, because somebody approved that application, and whoever's file it is should be able to give us a concise summary of what GBA considerations were implemented. Whether, I don't even know, do developers have to submit a GBA plus assessment as part of their package? So the question about what the specific process was on the municipality's side, somebody owns that file, and that person can write an email and tell us, and then we'll know. And so I wonder if it might be a more efficient and effective use of time to split that off, as Jane suggests, is that we don't want to lose focus on that. Split that off, get that email. The chair fires off a polite reply after coordinating with all the other people who are also going to write polite replies. And then to get a better idea of how, grosso modo, the question of equity considerations is addressed in planning. I think that's the presentation.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for that, Liz, 100%. So can we leave that with, and I'm going to say this with all due respect, with staff to determine who's the person or who are the people that should come to our next meeting to speak to the issue of how are we applying or how are they applying SGBA plus and the HRM social policy framework to their decision making. And if I may be so bold, I think there's good synergy between that and the discussion of how do we as a committee also implement the plus and GBA plus in the work that we do. So, I hear you, Councillor Lovelace, that, maybe we can't do both at the same meeting, but I think it certainly would provide a nice illustration of the complexity of doing this kind of work in real time. So it might actually be useful for our committee to then, on the heels of that presentation and discussion, then go into the conversation about our own application of GBA plus. Are we comfortable with that? And then the other piece, thank you. And the other piece I understand is that who is responsible, Liz, for that file, that's an email. That's not a presentation, but it's definitely something that we need to loop back to answer that question. So that can be dealt with separately from the presentation. So they're two separate pieces of work that will get done. Okay, everybody comfortable with that? Jane in particular, yes, good. Okay, so can we, we are out of time. So can we move along then and just state that our next meeting is April the 4th, and it will be virtual again for April the 4th, and we'll see if we can get the presentation sorted out with folks in the planning department, and we'll leave that with staff to report back on who's coming, et cetera, et cetera. If there are any questions on that, we can be reached. Could we have motion to adjourn? Hannah and Liz, thank you. So we are out of time. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time. And just on the heels of International Women's Day tomorrow, think about what we're all doing to contribute to this human project for the betterment of women all over the planet. So thank you, everybody, for being here, and all the best. Take care.
Well said.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. See you soon.